you heard of this Aaron Bushnell guy? He's the guy in the Air Force, set himself on fire in D.C. the other day. The reason why I don't tend to talk about this stuff is because there's basically nothing for me to say, really. Like, obviously, this channel is extremely committed, and has been for the entire time it's been around, to support for Palestinian people. So, any engagement with the topic is just a reiteration of my core views. But yeah, he was a young, member of the Air Force, set himself on fire in D.C., died. The flames were put out. He was rushed to the hospital. He was already dead. There's been a lot of reporting on it. Some of the reporting seems a little bit hesitant to draw attention to the fact that he was doing it, in support of Palestinian people, that his last words were "Free Palestine." There are plenty of news outlets that are accurately describing what he sacrificed his life for. Plenty aren't. It's to be expected, I suppose. There's a kind of, I guess, like innate indignity I feel to martyrdom today, or any kind of like heroic sacrifice of any kind. If something like this happened like 100 or 150 years ago, you hear some story of somebody who like very quickly stepped up and they're, put their life on the line in some, notable fashion and died for it. The description on their Wikipedia page, the way they'd be remembered was like, this was Aaron. He was the third of 7 children. His parents were this and this. He was described by others who knew him as intense. Then, on February 25th, so and so year, he did this thing. There is kind of like an austerity to what we know about a person back then that gives their like sacrifice, I think, a little bit more focus. Whereas nowadays, you burn yourself to death in front of, in DC, and people immediately start combing through your Reddit posts, which people have been. A lot of them are quite recent, too. Yeah, it's not going to surprise you. The guy is left-leaning, very left-leaning. It seems a lot of his Reddit posts have since been deleted. My guess is that his logins were known by a friend, and they've gone through purging it because they don't want vultures picking apart his memory. Not surprising. Oh yeah, I saw he was a Vosh. Is that true? Did he hate me? It wouldn't surprise me because apparently he was a fan of people who disliked me. He hated you. It's very funny. Ah, well, there you go, I suppose. Hopefully, his hatred of me inspired him to, live the life he chose to. Sort of like negatively polarizing him to action. He was an anarchist campist. He was an adherent to certain tendencies in the online left that I have historically strongly disagreed with. That being said, one of the big criticisms I've levied at people from that camp is that they don't actually do anything. So in this respect, at least, I have been roundly silenced. Not only did Aaron not do anything, he actually did the most thing it's sort of possible for anyone to do. He was posting in favor of Professor Flowers. Jesus. I hope you can all appreciate how surreal this is for me. I don't want to draw too much attention to it though, because it kind of contributes to the innate degradation of any kind of sacrifice being followed with people like preening through social media accounts. It doesn't really matter to me. I don't give a shit. This isn't like a wound against me. There's a bunch of discourse here with regards to like mental health, which is sort of like innately like a biased perspective to take, I think. Because if in any other situation where a soldier died for like a cause, nobody would even bring up mental health, right? Like if there was some soldier back in Vietnam who like raced back into gunfire in a futile effort to save some comrade of theirs and ended up getting shot, like they'd be thought of that self-sacrificial gesture would be thought of as heroism, right? Like nobody would think of it in any other way. The important thing that you guys have to understand is that as human beings, as living creatures, we're biologically driven to not die. Very strong wiring up here telling us to not do that. So anybody who's willing to do anything to get in the way of that wiring, soldier, martyr, firefighter, even a police officer, they're all crazy to some extent. It is innately irrational to do stuff like that. The rational desire to simply sit safely on your couch and consume potato chips. This is what God wants for us. People who act in any way, more dangerously than that. They're all crazy. So people will say, oh, he had mental health issues. oh, he had problems with this or that. And like, sure. I mean, you could pick through that in any soldier, I feel. What would come of it? Why the double standard? You know? The idea of a person dying for a cause or to prove a point or to save people, even in an indirect and abstract way, like in the way that he did, would otherwise be thought of as heroic. The difference is, in cases like that, dying isn't a part of the plan. Most soldiers, cops, and firefighters go to great lengths not to die until at some point, they do, right? Because ultimately, if you're in situations like that, especially as a soldier, you can make the choice to piss in your pants and run, right? But eventually, like, yeah, a lot of them are put in a very direct situation of like, if you do this thing, you're likely to die. And it is literally their job to do that thing. So I just think people are acting like ghouls. A lot of you in chat, to be honest, right now as well, to be honest with you, over the whole damn thing. The concept of martyrdom is in an immediate sense very disquieting and irrational, I think, to people, because the idea of a person killing themselves to prove a point is not something that a lot of people like thinking about, for good reason, because it is innately uncomfortable. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. And any defense of like the idea of a person doing that will be interpreted by bad faith actors or like nut jobs or whatever as like, oh, you're like glorifying suicide or whatever, which, and to my mind, is absolute nonsense. That would be like saying you're by praising a person who sacrificed themselves in the line of duty, then that means you're like innately pro death or something. Or you could interpret like any like self-sacrificial action as a kind of like suicide by proxy if you wanted to, but that would be insane. Nobody does that because that's dumb. Why would you do that, right? There's a difference between wanting to die for a cause and being willing to die for a cause. I actually think that that's not true fundamentally. I completely disagree. You're just talking about probabilities at that point. Like 30,000 or so dead in Palestine. It's not like, in the grand scheme of conflict, you have people who die because they're protesters who get shot by the IDF. You have journalists who essentially, I ask you, is it not an act of suicide to be a Palestinian in the Gaza Strip and declare yourself a journalist? Because that's an action that seems to correspond very strongly with dying. Is that not an act of suicide? Look, there are plenty of things in desperate situations that people can do that massively increase the likelihood of them dying. The thing that makes us uncomfortable is that Aaron could have kept living. He could have lived to 83. He was in America. But Palestinians don't have that choice. That's the thing. That's the line that he's trying to cross. That's the barrier he's proving the point about. For us, every act of self-sacrifice is a choice. For the Palestinian, it's not. It's just a thing that is happening to them. It's not like a comfortable subject. It's also not something I think that lines up very well with a sort of clean moral prescription. I certainly wouldn't advocate anyone else do that, set themselves on fire in front of the White House. That's not like a course of action I advocate for, It's a thing that happened, and I think that it having happened, people can choose how to interpret it. And there are people who are going to use it as some like, hand wavy, oh, he was mentally ill, radicalized online, which, I mean, everyone's radicalized online these days, or like, oh, he was crazy or whatever. But I just don't think we would say those things about people operating under similar mental conditions in socially normalized ways, I think there are so many ways in which something like this can happen that that we would consider heroism. Okay, how about this? What about a protester who has a legal right to be protesting? They're Palestinian. They have a legal right to protest. They're on the Gaza Strip. They're not hurting anyone, but they are being no. Let's say somebody in the West Bank. Okay, let's say there is a father in the West Bank, right? And he's being sort of muscled off of his family's land by a group of settlers backed up by the IDF. They have guns, He doesn't have a gun, so he can't really do anything. And the only thing he could do is, die as a martyr if he decided to fight against them anyway. But they're trying to muscle him off the land, and he says, no, I am planting my feet firmly. I will not move. This is my land, not yours. Shoot me if you will. and they shoot him. That is an action he takes that led directly to his death that I think most people would fairly regard as heroic, you know? He's taking an action. It will lead to his death. The only thing he can really do is prove a point, right? But, you know, I think people would have a much easier time considering something like that well-intentioned or well-spirited. I don't think anyone would look at that and go like, oh, that's just suicide, you know? Oh, mental illness or whatever. Oh, and it happens? Yeah, it happens all the time. Stuff like that. Anyway, we tend to venerate stuff like this under other circumstances. I just think people are being weird about this specifically. For example, I don't think typically the monk who set himself on fire in the Vietnam War, like when people talk about that, they don't normally say like, oh, wow, he was mentally ill, you know? Wow, how sad, that's suicide. They talk about it in the broader context of the conflict. It's just right now people are leaping to the opportunity to go like, ah, well, this guy was just sick or whatever. Nobody goes like, ah, well, that monk needed a therapist, you know? Like that. It's I don't know. Just people are remarkably weird about this. But it was still kind of dumb though. Okay, really? Do you really think, like, reaching through time and history, that one of the most memorable acts of protest in a conflict that killed hundreds of thousands of people, one death among innumerable mass graves, that act, which may have played a significant role in turning American support for the war away, and therefore ending the war, that was dumb? This is what I mean. And I, not to say I'm adopting a sort of Islamic perspective on martyrdom. I just think that people are being weird about this. That's just a weird thing to say, I guess. Like no perspective, no context, you know? No perspective at all. I don't get it. Aren't there better methods of activism than setting yourself on fire? Then go do them, Lilycrumb. Sure, whatever. Like, why would you say that in any other context? Would you go to the father who stood his ground and was shot for it and go like, there are better ways, you could have done this, that? I just, again, the weirdness here, I don't understand. I don't understand at all. FYI, that monk was protesting the persecution of Buddhists by the Vietnamese government, which is Roman Catholic. Oh, totally off in the cause then. My point stands, but I didn't know that. I actually don't know very much about that. Political protest, 1963, Buddhist monk Chich Quang Duclit set himself on fire. Protest anti-Buddhist discrimination by the South Vietnamese government, which the U.S. was backing its fight against. Okay, that's why. It's so they're related because the oppression was probably in part of like the American occupation of the southern portion of the Vietnamese. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Oh boy, we're off down a hole there. No, well, I mean, it's an enduring image. I don't know that much about the specifics of like the persecution of Buddhists in Vietnam during that time though, so I can't really say. I don't know enough about that. No Diem was oppressing Buddhists hard. Yeah, makes sense, I guess. There were stories of people on the Titanic giving up their life jackets to save people like children and are celebrated as heroes. Yeah, I don't know. Is it specifically because of the fire thing that people freak out about this? Like I would also not advocate anyone watching this or anyone who enjoys my content to like adopt a self-sacrificial attitude in any other context. Have I not? Have I not said so many times, if you're at a protest, don't act in any way that's going to get a cop to kill you? Like, if you're getting arrested, don't fight back against the cop, even if you think you're in the right, even if the cop is definitely breaking the law by arresting you, don't fight back against the cop. I endorse like a very non-self-sacrificial attitude because I want all of you to live as long as you possibly can. But if somebody did, you know, get like beaten by a cop and like lashed out and attacked the cop back and got killed for it, my thought on that wouldn't be like, that's sad. Would have been more optimal of him to not fight back against the people beating him to death while he was, obeying the law. Mental health issue, suicide by cop, da-da-da. Is that not a ghoulish way to go about things? Anyway, whatever the case is, people are picking through all of the shit that he said on Reddit. Apparently he was a Redditor, which is... as I said, innately undignified. It also, in a roundabout way, it's actually slightly based that he has these this history of Reddit comments because it prevents right-wingers who are anti-Israel because they're anti-Semitic from co-opting him. Because one of his recent comments began with whiteness erases culture. Again, I maintain the term whiteness never should have left academia. Whiteness in reference to like elements of white supremacy, which are a part of, broader culture. Whiteness isn't even necessarily something that exclusively exists in white people. It's just it's a broad academic term. A lot of people attribute the wrong things to it, whatever. But anyway, he do be posting. Vosh, when you give up a life jacket to help someone, it's the actions taken in life that had meaning. The death had no meaning and is nothing more than a tragedy. Okay. But he had to live to do the self-immolation. I don't know what you mean. Like, that was the action he took in life. He didn't just go up to the White House and then spontaneously become a corpse. His final action in life was drawing an enormous amount of attention to, like, an ongoing genocide. It wasn't the White House? Capitol building? Capitol building? Not the White House? DC, whatever. Israeli embassy? Ah, gotcha. But how does this death help anyone? Well, the point of doing stuff like this is that you draw attention to a cause, no? Chat, what is wrong with you today? I don't know. It's weird. What if he burned a flag at the door of the embassy? Yeah, Lily Crumb, that definitely would have gotten the same attention. A burnt flag. Lily Crumb, quit being a... What is with the IQ drop? Like, you can be uncomfortable with it. You can say he shouldn't have done it. That's fine. I'm not arguing against the idea. Why are you guys suddenly acting so obstinate about this and like a weird, I don't get it. I don't understand. You wouldn't do this in the context of any other act of sacrifice or anything else comparable. You're just uncomfortable with the topic. That's fine. It's uncomfortable. It's fine. It's fine to be uncomfortable with it. That's okay. Good Lord. I mean, I feel like we've seen so many cases of stuff like this happening in other conflicts, and people generally, through like the lens of history, look back on stuff like this. I wouldn't say favorably, but usually it's a reflection of how severe the situation was. I said I don't condemn him and I want his message to be propagated. I just feel sad he had to do this. Well, he didn't have to do this. He chose to. You can disagree with him feeling that he needed to do this, and you can be sad that he felt that there was a need to do this, and I feel both of those ways. But it happened, you know, and there are different directions you can take the conversation afterwards, and I just feel like debating his corpse over the, you know, efficacy of this is leaving aside the tastefulness. It's ill-informed. Stuff like this does draw a lot of attention. Not to get all utilitarian about it or whatever, but God only knows how many lives are saved by, like, any given act of self-sacrifice in any given situation, you know? A lot of this stuff can't actually be known, even in retrospect, right? Like, the students killed at Kent State. Like, was it possible that their sacrifice ended up turning public opinion in a way that actually saved more lives in the future? You have no idea. Nobody can know. It's not possible. It's literally like different timeline shit. You have no idea. That wasn't a willful sacrifice, of course. I'm just talking about needless death. The only thing you can really do is mourn the dead and hope that things get better. That's pretty much all you can do, you know? What are your thoughts on the media trying to frame it as just mentally ill? Well, first of all, like I said, anybody who's willing to sacrifice their health or their life for any cause is on some level kind of crazy, you know? They also tend to drive history. You think the average Red Army soldier was like totally level, you know? You think the average GI in Normandy was like just up here, just totally fine? Like they're all crazy. You need this from soldiers. That's what they're trained to do. It's a very it's like selective craziness, and that's one of the reasons they get in trouble when they get back home, right? Vets have issues readjusting to the relatively low stakes of civilian life in a lot of cases. Red Army soldiers were conscripted, so they were probably median. I'm sorry, do you think that mental states are innate and unchanging from birth, or do you think the circumstances of conflict might have made those people more normal? What does them being conscripted have to do with it? Conscription was a thing? What are you talking about? Is that the only way to not be complicit in genocide? Compared to him, does that make us all more complicit? Oh, yes, objectively, everyone here is more complicit in the genocide than he is. He has, you know, if nothing else, he has thoroughly divested himself of that. He has removed himself entirely from, you know, from the equation. He has violently ejected himself from that, you know, the grim calculus of genocide. They are interpreting it as you saying they joined the Red Army for ideological reasons. Oh, well, good thing I didn't say that. And I don't know why they're interpreting that from what I said, because I didn't say it. You know, they should work on that. He's the first white man that is innocent, just ever in history, yeah. There's no glory or heroism in dying in war. It is not good and proper to die for one's country. Ah, bullshit. You can be a hero fighting the Nazis. Sure you can. You can also be a hero even if the war you're fighting in is unjust, if the thing you do that is heroic is itself just, right? Thoughts on using rest and power for a white guy? Man, I saw that discourse, and, you know, it is like an objective fact that Aaron has done more for the cause than the median black person. Okay, like the idea that term is racially gatekept is wild. It's a comrade thing, you know? Literally, like, anarchist self-immolation will go into the history books like, oh, sorry, his skin tone wasn't right. Oh, stupid, dumb. Everyone wants to jump the opportunity to Virtue signal. Isn't rest in power for people who are oppressed? It's just a solidarity thing. You know, originally rest in power, black power, but broadly it's just like if you for the cause, you know, fighting for justice. Yeah, they're psyops. You know, yeah. Don't worry. The CIA is trying to you know, redirect people back to the State Department narrative by going online and posing as, you know, black radicals on Twitter and trying to argue that it's actually racist to say rest in power about an anarchist who self-immolated to stop a genocide. When Michael Brooks died, he got rest in power. Pretty sure he wasn't black. Nah, Michael Brooks was black. It wasn't even originally associated with specifically black people. The first time it was ever used was for a Filipino artist, and it was used in 2003 for a white woman who was killed by the IDF. Huh, bringing that back around. To be fair, based on his Twitter, he would have also called it racist to tell him rest in power. Wait, you might be right, actually. Yeah, he from heaven, he's looking down and he's saying like, hey, come on, guys, quit appropriating the, shit, you're right. Well, I guess that's how it is sometimes. Didn't this exact same event happen with a lawyer over climate change and nothing happened? Nothing ever directly happens as a consequence of anything like this, you know? Broader historical forces are at play. You never have any idea how many people who in the future make the right decisions who may have been positively motivated by having seen this or anything else. That's just not how it is. You know, nobody gets the satisfaction of a clean narrative. That's one of the reasons why people, especially weak-willed people like liberals, cling to things like electoralism and civic policy as the exclusive battleground of politics, the only things that matter, because they're empirical, they're written in, you know, ink. They're right down there. The broader cultural victories, i.e. the things Republicans have been consistently winning at over the past decade, despite having fewer numbers, the ones who get to determine the discourse, drive the narrative, make the talking points, you know, these things aren't as direct and empirical. You don't really have a direct measurement on what stupid statement or talking point or action or whatever leads down the line to this, that, the other. Vosh, I want the mathematical evidence as to why this was beneficial for Marxism. Well, math is anti-Marxist, so I'm afraid the question is self-defeating. How do we fight that, though, with our own cultural talking points? Yeah, of course. That's what this channel is. I'm not writing policy. I think what makes me mad about the media narrative about Aaron is that I feel like they're trying to brush off his entire message with the mental health accusations. Like, I mean, to draw a comparison to the last, like, war we got involved in, if there was a, like a Kurd in Iraq who self-immolated in protest against Saddam Hussein before we invaded, that person would have been like an unambiguous hero in American media. Like that person would have, like every American newspaper and publication would have been like telling the lifetimes and story of like a Kurdish guy self-immolating because Saddam Hussein was a bastard to the Kurds, or like anything with the Taliban as well, like a woman self-immolating for oppression. Like there would be the idea of like anybody going out in that environment and being like, you know, oh, what about their mental health? What about a Uyghur Muslim self-immolating to protest their oppression in the Xinjiang region in China, you know? If they did that, not only would it get massive coverage, the idea of like the New York Times or whatever coming out and being like, oh yeah, they had mental health issues, this is like a mentally ill thing, so sad. Like that just would not happen because, you know, martyrdom is something that we admire and accept when it's done by foreign people in foreign lands for causes we agree with. But if it's done by white people in our land for causes that people don't agree with, then it's like, well, actually mental illness, blah, 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 blah. It's more disquieting when a white person does it, I think, because let's be real here. The idea of like a Muslim in the Middle East self-immolating for a cause or a Buddhist monk is a lot more palatable to the Western mind than a white person who used Reddit and Twitter just like you doing it themselves. It's way more close to home. It feels way less abstracted by potential cultural differences. It's like, yeah, you know, people can't really like ease themselves with the belief that it's just more like that there, you know? But this sounds like you think Uyghurs should self-immolate. It sounds like that to you because you're a moron and you're an idiot and you're a buffoon. I never said it. I never implied it. To the shadow realm with you. Literally, the Arab Spring started with a Tunisian self-immolation. Interesting. Well, I mean, yes, but like, yeah, again. Oh, the mental health. Oh. Do you think there's no difference between killing yourself and being killed by someone else? A soldier running into fire does generally do so to save someone or some other reason that not specifically to kill themselves than a shot. This is incomprehensible gibberish. You need to proofread these messages before you send them to me. Soldiers do things that put their lives at risk, often for abstract causes. Many soldiers die not of like heroically charging into the line of fire, but of dysentery or trench foot, or of the plane that they were going to paratrooper drop from being shot out of the air before they even get a chance to. The whole point of being a soldier is that you are massively increasing the likelihood of your death for the purpose of doing some cause or another. And also, again, while I don't endorse self-sacrificial attitudes in general, the way in which Aaron chose to kill himself objectively had more of an impact on the issue he cared about than any other way that a soldier could possibly engage in some kind of externally self-sacrificial. Like, how would a U.S. Air Force member, like, what is he going to do? Paradrop into Gaza Strip? Like, what? There's not really a comparison there. But he cared about the genocide. He did what he felt he could and had to. And while I don't think that you guys should go out there and imitate his model, I also think it's pretty grim for people to look at that and go like, you know, because again, once more, I point out nobody would be reacting this way if it was done by a foreign person in a foreign land. None of us would be having this discourse. If this was 2002 or whatever, and you know, this was some kind of like Western chauvinist live stream, hypothetically, you know, if you could imagine such a thing, and a Kurdish person self-immolated out of protest for Saddam Hussein, chat would not, none of you would be doing these like, well, don't you think that's weird? All of you would be talking about how Saddam Hussein is a bastard. We've seen this exact same thing happen multiple times, Vosh. It never does anything to raise awareness of the issues it's done for. What? No, the opposite. It usually has a massively disproportionately large impact on the fact that it's shocking. It does more than what? Again, what I keep ending this conversation with the definitive proof that I'm right and you're being weird hypocrites, and then you respond by not addressing what I'm saying and being weird hypocrites, you know? None of you would react this way if it was being done in a different context, even if the actual underlying action was the same. So stop being inconsistent and reflect on whatever racial or ideological biases are leading you to feel that way. Do you think the genocide of the Palestinian people is less pressing than what Saddam Hussein was doing to the Kurds? Do you think that an Iraqi person doing it is somehow more just or dignified than a white American doing it? What bias leads you to act this way? Did it impact the climate change debate, Vosh? We saw this exact event. You can't instantly change a global issue. Oh, man. You wouldn't do this in other cases. If there was, like, any other story of some individual, like, Ukrainian soldier who died, it's like, well, they died to, like, save this village. Did that end the war? You don't understand. You don't even know the double standard that you're applying. You don't even understand. You can't self-immolate for climate change because of the pollution. Shit, you're right. The combustion actually makes it worse. Who does this educator sway? Okay, I do think you're acting in bad faith. Dr. Lee, all you've done is ask questions that you should be able to answer for yourself. Who does this educator sway? Think about it for a second. It gets massive amounts of attention, the same way any other action like this has in the past. It leads people to look at it. We don't know what it will do or what it won't do. That's not how any of this works. Protests aren't done with the knowledge that it will absolutely 100% change anyone's mind in any circumstance. You wouldn't ask these questions about anything else. You're just being thick, and I am sending you to the Shadow Realm. The fact that you're so emotionally invested in being inconsistent about it is a testament to the fact that it's an audacious enough act that it gets attention. You were right about how people forgetting how to think the nanosecond uncomfortable topic comes up. Yeah, no, consistently, yeah. Ban anyone who said the soldiers on Snake Island were based who now have considered that. Oh, yeah! At the beginning of the Russian-Ukraine war, where there were soldiers on Snake Island who told the Russian warships to f*** off, an action which would 100% result in their deaths. Presumably, I think others were found alive later, and everyone in chat, down to the man, every single one of you, even though it was an action that had no meaning because the Russians were going to take the island anyway, even though it led to the death of people, or presumed deaths, perceived deaths of multiple people, everyone in chat loved it because that was so based in red-pilled. How is that not suicide? I ask you. Really, how is that not suicide? It is an action you might as well be suiciding by cop. We have a term for that. Suicide where you prompt other people to kill you. But nobody gave a f*** because that was heroism. If that is heroism, even though, again, my understanding is that they were captured, not killed, but we're operating in the perception here. We thought they were dead for months and months and months. Remarkable inconsistency, but that was based in red-pilled. And you know why? Do you know why it's different? I'll tell you why. It's because you're narrativizing. In your head, the aesthetic of valiantly defying an opponent, even if it will guaranteed lead to your death for no material gain, is more heroic than killing yourself. Because killing yourself triggers biological rooted feelings of discomfort that exist for a reason. That's it. It's just closer to home. The idea of a person killing themselves for a cause, especially a cause you agree with, feels a lot closer to home than Ukrainian soldiers valiantly defying a Russian warship, because the Russian warship ain't coming for you, is it? You might agree with what they did, but it's abstract, it's distant, it's far away. Not so with this. And it makes you uncomfortable, and you react the way you've reacted. And you should be disappointed in yourselves. Not for being uncomfortable, but for being inconsistent and wasting my and everyone else's time. I say addressing people I've already banned. To be fair, Vosh, I think a big difference is that they were put in that position. Nope. Because again, they could have just surrendered. In our understanding of that event at the time that it took place, when we thought they were killed, they chose to be defiant when they could have just surrendered. Purely a choice, no benefit. It was done for morale. You know, morale is a thing people are willing to die and kill for, right? That's ultimately what we're talking about. You know, there have been innumerable military actions taken that were dangerous and self-sacrificial purely for the sake of morale, and a lot of them are defensible. That's one of the sort of grim considerations that you have to make when doing war reporting or when directing troops, that sometimes actions that get more people killed on your side actually are better in the long run because it preserves people's hope in the future. That's one of the reasons why that so many efforts were, like literally our most famous photo of, I don't know if it's literally the most famous photo, but Iwo Jima. Can somebody explain to me the utilitarian benefit of around with flags during in like a combat zone? It's purely morale. They didn't die doing it. They could have, you cretin. What are you what point? If they had, do you think people would have been like, they had mental health issues, why would they risk themselves? To be fair, they staged this photo after the battle was over. Didn't they do it for real during the battle and then later they staged it? Pardon me if I'm forgetting the history on this, but didn't they actually do that? And then later on they were like, well, we could get a better photo of that, and they did it after they retook the island? I think they did. Okay, that's what I remember. Okay. It was staged mid-battle. Half of them died after in combat. You all understand that oftentimes in conflict, like stuff like that is undertaken for the purpose of morale, right? The position was still under Japanese fire. The flag soon had bullet holes after being raised. And yeah, they reenacted with a bigger flag for press, but it still happened. Oh, then there you go. Yeah. This is the original. I see the flag is smaller. Would chat also react the same for the Tank Man in Tiananmen Square? That's also a great example. Yeah, how do you guys think the Tank Man did after Tiananmen Square? You think he's all right? Living large? Healthy? Alive? Any particular reason he chose to stand in front of a tank? I remember all the news coverage from that one. Tiananmen Square happened and everyone was like, I wonder about the mental health of that guy. I don't know. Pointless and mentally ill. Yeah, exactly. That's what people in Western media said about Tank Man. Exactly. Pointless and mentally ill. Why would he do that? Hey, look, Tank Man died at Tiananmen Square, and the Chinese government still exists. Idiot. Dumbass. I don't disagree with your point, but it feels disingenuous to put suicide and being killed together as though they're the same. We literally have a term called suicide by cop, which is where people commit suicide by putting themselves in situations where they're likely to be killed by the police. If we call that suicide, would that not apply to Tiananmen Square? Like, what do you think's going to happen? You walk in front of a tank at a military parade being held by an authoritarian government. Suicide by CCP. I think you're wild in V-Man, but I'm not trying to get banned. I don't think I'm saying anything even remotely controversial. That's the thing that frustrates me. I'm not arguing that it's good to go out there and do anything self-sacrificial. I'm not arguing that you should all do it. I'm not arguing anything even remotely controversial. Everything, as far as I'm concerned, you'd have to be thick to disagree with me on this. If you think, for a fact that the coverage of Tiananmen Square did not lead to a bunch of people hand-wringing and going, just why do you do that? Pointless, blah, blah. People talked about him like a hero. The subject is uncomfortable, but again, if it happens to foreign people in a foreign land, everyone is like, what terrors must have been wrought to motivate such behavior. But then, when it happens to a white guy over here, or I should say a white guy does it to himself over here, this chat filled with white guys, mind you, suddenly feels a little closer to home. That's it. It's inconsistent. It bothers me. It's irrational. You can disagree with it and say that you don't want to personally light yourself on fire, which is great. You don't have to. I'm not going to, by the way, in case you look to me for advice. I'm not going to light myself on fire, at least not by choice. Who knows what crazy, wacky hijinks could happen, you know, a comedy trip, cartoon nonsense, but I don't want to, and I'm not going to try to. So if you're looking for like advice, don't light yourself on fire, but don't pretend that there's not a double standard here. That's it. That is it. I'm done. That's the point. It's done. I'm done. Some of you guys are being just exhausting, and I don't understand why. Yeah, good Lord, the celestial patriarch of the West, Jesus Christ, literally. Like, in 2020, the practice resumed when Russian journalist Irina Slavina burned herself in Nizhny Novgorod after her last post on Facebook, in which she wrote, "I ask you to blame the Russian Federation for my death. Mentally ill and pointless. I have no input in the situation." Wait, Jesus is actually a perfect example. He did everything knowing it was going to lead to his death. Did Jesus commit suicide? I mean, I would argue he did. Like, I feel like that's a sensible thing to believe. Christians might disagree, but if you do something that you know will lead to your death, I mean, that's kind of like, yeah, it's just that. So there's so much like culturally normalized discourse around this, where it's like, you know, what people think is or isn't. Yeah, I don't know. Is it suicide to recklessly climb a really dangerous mountain if you have only moderate like climbing experience? Is that like deliberate suicide, or is that or is that just like recklessness? Why do people say things are suicidal if they're likely to result in your death, but if they do result in your death, they don't get called a suicide, right? Like there's a lot of inconsistency, and a lot of it really comes down to like the mental state we prescribe onto the dead person after the fact, where there are some kinds of intentionalities that we interpret as being purely being done for the sake of killing oneself. There's obvious examples of that: taking pills, slitting your wrists, where the only possible thing you could be trying to do would be killing yourself. But then there's like suicide by cop, where like, you know, maybe you get shot to death, maybe they arrest you. Was it suicide by cop? Are they just crazy, you know? Or is it like, oh, climbing that mountain might have been a kind of suicide, because if you fuck up midway through, you will die. Maybe that was like their attempted suicide. Like, it's not like they're surviving a 200-foot like free fall, you know? But we don't call that a suicide. We call that like, oh, they fucked up. We prescribe the mental state. You know, it's variable. I don't think there's any way to like fix that. We can't like magically know intent. I just think we should be aware of the occasional ambiguity. And it gets even more ambiguous when you're talking about stuff like martyrdom and soldiers, because at that point, you know, like, you know, at that point, it's even more weird and complicated and uncomfortable. It's all uncomfortable.